In ancient times, two young beauties competed with each other who will be the main empress of the empire. One of them, named Urina Cartia, was very wayward. She was the daughter of the Marquis of Carthia. The other was extremely cute. Her name was Lydia de Fron. Her father was the Marquis de Fron. One outstanding magician who was once taken from the asylum by Marquis de Fron was able to end the endless war between the girls. This guy's name was Carrion. He had blonde hair and red eyes. Such features in the appearance spoke of the fact that a person has a blessing from the goddess. Lydia de Fron was the love of the brilliant magician. Once, for the sake of the happiness of his beloved girlfriend, he resorted to the murder of Urina Cartia. Carrion brutally took the life of a characteristic beauty, and her death became a real tragedy. It could be the perfect ending for any novel where the villain ends so badly. But events could develop in such a way that Urina Cartia could be the main character. Then the final must definitely be different. The young man turns to Urina and asks what would happen if he told her that he wanted a girl. Could this story change if Urina is Carrion's lover instead of Lydia de Fron? Carrion wonders if he knows everything in advance, will he be able to protect the one he actually killed? It is necessary to return to the past and start everything from the beginning together with the daughter of Marquis Cardia, so the young magician decided. A fair-haired young man confesses his love for Urina. The girl thinks about the boy's words. Will it be able to save her from a terrible death? She asks the magician to keep everything a secret and to remember everything that happened to them according to the new scenario. Urina begs him not to abandon her and to save her from murder at the first opportunity. The girl reminds Carrion that she also saved him today, so she asks him to do it for her. The young man looks excited because Urina demands from him a promise that he will not leave her in trouble. The maid turns to Urina and asks Pani what happened after she broke the cup. The main character is shown here at a young age, still quite a boy. He is running somewhere having a mysterious appearance. He must have been running so fast that he pushed the cup and broke it. The maid asks the girl if she is all right and if she is not injured. But at the same time, the second voice of the maid gets angry because the lady does not understand who is actually standing in front of her. The lady replies that she is fine. Urina notes that the boy who is running away is still quite small, but already so unsociable. The young man has doubts whether all this is worth his attention and any actions in relation to Urina. The main character tells that her name is Yoon Seung. She reminds herself of a day many years ago. On that terrible night, a lot of snow fell and there was a car accident in which she died at a fairly young age. She also remembers how she closed her eyes for the last time before she died. But still she managed to come to her senses and open her eyes. However, Yoon Seung was already in another body, the heroine of a novel she had recently read, but her name was Urina Cartia. The young girl carefully looked at herself in the mirror. She noticed that she had changed a little on the outside. She could not believe what had happened to her and said that it was completely impossible. She looked scared and shocked. After living in a new estate for a week, the main character had no choice but to get used to her new life and status. Everything was like from that book. Nova Urina thinks that now it is necessary to do so, that no one notices that she is a different person. The maid does her job and asks what outfit the lady would like to wear today. Urina in Yoon Sen's past life frightened the servant girl with a mysterious look. She looked completely unkind and wondered what kind of thief she was. The young lady did not understand what was waiting for her from the maid who was standing with the dress in the room. Therefore, the frightened worker began to cry and apologize. In the book, the rival of the main character was Urina Cartia. Everyone knew her because she came from the famous Cartia family and was a famous robber. According to the plot of the novel, the life of Urina Cartia is tragically cut short, and a young man named Carrion kills her. At one time, Marquis de Fron took the little boy Carrion from the asylum. While the maid continues to rummage, the young lady tries to remember what happened to Urina's character. She remembers as if she died, but cannot recall the circumstances under which it happened. The worker dares to tell her that the carriage is already waiting downstairs. Yoon Seung reports that he needs to leave urgently. The girl gets into the carriage in the presence of servants. Yoon Sang, from her past life, is happy that she is the only one who knows the plot of the book, the events of which she is now living in her new life after the resurrection. According to the author's idea, Marquis de Fron takes Carrion to himself, but there are some circumstances. The main character of the present time hatches a plan, according to which she must be the first to find Carrion in the asylum. She thinks that this will give her the opportunity to save Urina Cardia and completely change her fate and life. Returning to the event when the cup broke, the young lady remembered that she had not been able to find Carrion for 6 months. After all she knew about him were red eyes and blonde hair. But she still managed to find him, and he looked like a poor, frightened boy. He was so wild that he touched the cup with his jerky movements when he was chatting with Yun Sena. Yun Sang immediately realized that the person she was looking for was in front of her. After all, he had such rare features as red eyes and blonde hair. She mentioned that according to the plot of the novel, he should become an outstanding magician in the future. She takes his hand and in a friendly way persuades him to go with her. The heroine continues to lure the boy and promises him that if he goes with her, he will forget about hunger. At this time, a maid calls her. The girl waits for an answer, and the fair-haired boy chooses words he stutters and cannot formulate sentences. Finally, he begins to shout that he does not believe in mercy and will not buy into it. He asks the girl why he gave up on her. Yun Seung is surprised by the young man's reaction. She asks him not to be so nervous and says that she will explain everything to him now. The boy still looks very scared. He is hurt by this treatment and starts to cry. At the same time, he shouts that they want to use him as if he were a toy. The young lady continues to wonder where he gets such thoughts from. She does not understand the meaning of what he just said and questions. The guy tries to explain. He claims that he knows the tastes of aristocrats. They like children with a similar appearance to his Yun Seung, wonders how he could possibly know such words. The maid who came with Yun Sena to the asylum persuades her to leave. She doesn't understand ladies' intrusive behavior. At the same time, the other essence of the worker is angry at everything. The lady asks to be left alone. Finally, Yun Seng agrees with the young man and lets him know that he is absolutely right in his statement. Then she explains everything to him. The lady tells the boy that she herself does not believe in mercy in this life, so of course she wants to just use him for her own purposes. Yun Seung continues to persuade him to go with her. She reports that this year's winter in the Empire will be too harsh and cold. The boy listens carefully to the girl who says that if he stays here, he simply will not be able to survive this winter and save himself. The cunning girl appeals with another trump card. She offers the boy the support of the famous Karsha family and says that this is the best option because he can simply die here. But knowing all the events from the book in advance, she understands that of course this child will not die. After all, the next fall, after the hard winter, the Marquis de France intends to take him to his house. This is how the events in the novel she read developed. She mentioned it again. The girl gently touches the poor man in order to attract him to her and gain his trust. She looks intently into his gaze. Yun Seung says that he has unusual red eyes. This may indicate that he has a great talent for magic. The heroine says that she can take him from the shelter, invest in him, and provide a normal life. For this, he must save her when needed. The guy listens to her, carefully tries to digest this information. It was a calm, sunny summer day outside. A luxurious carriage stood near the shelter into which the young hero's belongings were packed. Yun Sang, satisfied that she finally managed to convince the young man, asks him if he has forgotten anything. The little shy one sarcastically hides his wounded hands when he hears the question, "Did he have time to say goodbye to everyone?" And then, hiding his eyes, sadly replies that there are no people here to whom he could finally say goodbye. The girl pretends that she is saddened by such words and is very sorry that the main character has no friends left here. The heroine's gaze again falls on the hands of the fair-haired boy, red from inflammation. Her eyes even fill with tears for a moment. Yun Seung says that she understood the boy when he said that he had no one here to say goodbye to and supported him. The heroine informs that it is time for them to leave. She asks if he will agree to treat the wounds on his hands when they arrive at their destination. The guy thinks. Then Pawnee tells him to follow her in a commanding tone and turns to leave. The guy stopped and was still thinking about whether he should go at all and what to answer her. Yun Sang was the first to enter the carriage, as the poor young man followed her uncertainly. The worker continued to demolish things. The girl's maid came to the carriage and called her. Yun Seung asked what she wanted from her. The worker replied that she did not understand the actions of the young lady. Why all this? The heroine angrily replied that this boy was very gifted, and she intended to use him. The poor asylum boy overheard their conversation. He also overheard that he did not belong here at all. Questions arose in his head. Yun Seung confirmed that she intends to take care of the little one. The maid wondered how the girl knew if he had any special. The worker did not calm down. She insisted that it was necessary to first get permission from the owner and only then to take the young man. The heroine carefully listened to the dissatisfied nanny, looking with angelic eyes, and only then turned to her. In a confident voice, Pani said that she belonged to the Karthia family, so she could do whatever she wanted in this world. Then she turned around and climbed into the carriage. The worker stood motionless, having nothing to answer this. The poor man sat in his seat. Either out of fear or out of anger, he clenched his hands into fists. The main character sat opposite and literally drilled the guy with her eyes. Her gaze was mysterious and cold. The hero couldn't stand it and asked his savior why she was looking at him so intently. As if suddenly realizing something, he excitedly said that he should be taken away now for rescue as promised. Is he worried that they are just going to use him? In response, Yun-seng got angry and asked the young man to watch his language. Suddenly, the lady noticed how the young man in front of her turned into a cute cat, as if magic had begun to work. She wondered if it was she who had such power over the boy, or if he himself was able to reincarnate. The young mage appeared before her again in human flesh with reddened eyes. Finally, Yun-seong laughed and asked him his name. She immediately became so joyful and kind that even the maid paid attention to it. The girl realized that such a sudden openness and smiling face could play a bad joke on her. The confused boy replied that his name was Tom. Yun-seng deduced that he had a simple ordinary name and asked if he liked it. According to the plot of the novel, the young man did not like his own name, Carrion, and Yun-sen remembered it well. The fact is that his own mother, who did not love him at all and treated him badly, called him that. After thinking a little, the boy replied that he did not like his name. Yun-sen was satisfied with this answer, and she immediately came up with something. She asked the boy if she could now, as his guardian, give him a new name, and if he wanted it at all. As always, the young mage was silent, constantly thinking about the questions and suggestions of his savior. Then the lady happily said that she knew what the boy's name would be. But the young man seemed to hear a voice from his past life. He said his name was Carrion. Translated from the ancient language, it meant victory. Finally, Yun-seong said that he would now be called Reynard, or simply Ray for short. Translated from the ancient language, it meant hope. She asked if the young man— After all, the girl was counting on the young magician, and understood that this was her only hope. The young man, slowly in syllables, repeated the name that the lady had just offered him. Yun-seong was nervous. She asked why he didn't answer and said that maybe he didn't like that option. Then she decided to check and turned to him, calling him Tom again. The young man lowered his eyes and said in confusion that he was no longer Tom. He then confidently said that he should now be called Reynard. Yun-seng accepted this news with joy. With a victorious look on her face, she asked that Ray now take care of her where necessary. Arriving home, the girl immediately heard a negative answer to her request. The man said that he understands Yurina, the real Yun-seong, perfectly, but he cannot allow her to do this. Yurina looked confused and even cried when she heard the argument for refusal. The fact is that she cannot take care of a child. The father again repeated to his daughter why he does not allow her to let the little one live here with them. Next, Ray and a servant entered the room where only the husband and daughter were. When the emotions subsided a little, the man suggested to Urina that he could give an order for the young man to be trained as a servant. The man also added that the girl should respect the interests of the family and reckon with them. Therefore, they cannot take care of a child if they do not even. Urina guessed that she might face rejection, so she prepared information that if a family takes care of a child with special abilities, then their Karthia family already cared for and raised the child who soon became famous and well known. It was Knight Aaron. Having such a clear example in the family, Urina understood the importance of the fact that she should take the young man to her. So she said that Reynard has a special gift and is a future magician. She knows this for sure. She then shouted nervously that she didn't take him from the shelter to make the boy a servant. The father was suspicious of his daughter's words, that the young man really had the talent to study at the Crown Royal Academy in the future. Crown Kingdom is inferior to the Empire in many ways. It is smaller and therefore it so happened that students from different parts and many empires began to come to Krone to study and practice magic. The father again began to question Urin how exactly this boy without roots and on his own can enter the academy. The man told his daughter that he respected her wish, but it was completely illogical and groundless. Also, with a tired look, he added that he was tired of this conversation and it should end. Urina did not relent. She continued to persuade her father and offered one option. The girl understood that she could not lose such a chance, so she told her father that if they couldn't come to an agreement between them. Later, she added with a laugh that even if they didn't find Reynard's knack for magic, she still wouldn't leave him. The father finally agreed to the girl's persuasion and said that he would send a letter to Dave today. The man also suggested that Dave should be in the lab right now so they could have it after lunch. Urina was very happy at such a kindness from her father, so she began to happily thank him. When she left, the father began to doubt whether he was too kind to her. The girl was walking down the corridor with her maid when another maid approached them and informed them that they were having some problems. Yugapani excitedly asked what happened. The servant said it would be Mr. Reynard. Urina's eyes widened in surprise and asked again. At that time, they all heard some dishes fall to the floor and clang. The young maid shouted that no one would approach him. The girl and the workers were frightened, so they stood and did not move. They watched the boy's strange behavior. Reynard stood in such a position as if he was defending himself from an attacker. At the same time, he continued to scream hysterically not to be touched. Urina asked him, maybe someone hit him? The two maids nearby had completely different opinions about what was happening. Finally realizing what had happened, Pani turned to the young man in disappointment and said that The young man finally calmed down and listened carefully to his rescuer. Urina asked him to keep calm and not to worry. She said that no one would hurt him in this estate. Reynard objected and said that he had been touched and pointed to the maids behind Urina's back. The lady looked suspiciously at the workers who stopped whispering among themselves and shook their heads. Then she told Reynard that they had done no such thing, but he would not go back on his word. The young man crossed his arms again as if defending himself and began to shout that they were trying to undress him, but he was still a child. Shocked, Urina growled at the boy to stop talking nonsense. The frightened maids were already starting to cry. Unapani grabbed the little one and began to soothe him. She explained that they had come on purpose to help him wash up. Reynard was very surprised when he heard that they just wanted to wash him because hot water was poured into the bath. Finally, Urina understood why he had such a reaction to bath procedures and asked if he had never washed at all. The young man did not give up. He continued to ask. He was worried at the moment that two adult women wanted to undress him on purpose. The girl already angrily repeated that they just wanted to wash him, and Ray insisted that he was no longer a child and could handle himself. Urina explained that it was just their job, but the young man was very nervous and said that he had arms and legs to take care of himself. The whole point is that the poor lady didn't understand anything anymore, so she just kept silent. She had no choice but to end the dispute and told the workers they could be free. Ray really didn't like the fact that she just stuck around and let his abusers go. He suspected that she was just covering them up like that. Urina said that she will explain everything to him only after he goes to the bathroom. She told him to wash himself instantly if he refused the help of the maids. After all, she will also leave. But the boy was worried that suddenly someone might enter when he was washing himself. He did not trust the young lady's words. Urina then said that there was something she did not want to tell him so as not to offend. She had no choice but to admit that Reynard smelled bad. Ray didn't expect to hear that at all. He froze in place. Looking a little embarrassed, Urina summed up all of the above. She said that she would leave now, but he must wash himself thoroughly. Next, she saw how Reynard had changed dramatically. She understood that now he could do something terrible. But soon he became a little defenseless again, and Urina turned to him in a friendly way. The girl assured him that no one would harm him in this estate. She took the oath on the honorary name of Urina Cartia. Then she turned to the exit and said that they would definitely see each other later. However, Ray didn't just give up. He asked why he should believe her. Urina Cartia understood that he would not back down just like that. She wondered how else to convince him. The girl said that he had already trusted her for the first time when he agreed to leave the shelter with her. She asked why he believed her then and now doubts everything she said. Ray had something to say, but he was getting so worried that he couldn't form a thought. Urina got angry because she did not understand what was difficult about her question and why he was silent. She demanded an answer. Finally, the young man agreed and said that he believed her. To be honest, Urina did not expect such a quick agreement from the stubborn little one, so she herself was. After such a long and difficult persuasion, Reynard still climbed into the bathroom. He was wondering why the water in the bathroom could be so warm when Urina ran into the room and warned him about something. She just wanted to let him know where she put his clean clothes. Ray was confused and furious. The girl asked to wear clean clothes after bathing and said that she was leaving. Ray covered his eyes with his hands in despair. and he was also very ashamed to be seen naked. But in the end, he was able to control himself and instantly turned into a cute cat. He decided that when Urina entered the bathroom, the boy noticed how she demonstratively covered her nose. He wondered if he sniffed himself and concluded that he really smelled, but he thought that these were only the whims of the rich. It always seemed to Reynard that absolutely all people on Earth had a similar smell. He remembered the shelter and the fact that everyone there was the same, stank. Therefore, it was an ordinary story for him. Lying calmly in the bath in the hot water, he thought about his past life in the orphanage. He had no friends there because everyone didn't like his special red eyes. Those around him were afraid even of his gaze. The other kids hated him and constantly bullied him. They said he was cursed. He also remembered his father, who also sometimes beat him because of his red eyes. Ray realized that it was painful and unpleasant for him to remember the past, so he pushed these thoughts away. He drew attention to the colored soap. It seemed to him very beautiful and unusual, and he noted that it was the first time he had seen such a thing. The young man doubted whether he could use it because it was a soap for aristocrats. Twisting it in his hands, he noticed that this was exactly what urine cartia smelled like. Next, the young lady looked at the already clean boy's hands. She said the wounds on his palms were not deep. Two maids, who were also present in the living room, offered to examine him themselves and bring a first aid kit. Urina asked to leave them and said that she would do everything herself. Noticing how Ray was sitting and not taking his eyes off her, she asked what he was looking at. Embarrassed, Reynard said he wasn't looking. The girl immediately improved and asked if he really wasn't staring at her. Urina Cardia remembered that she, as the owner of the estate, had to be polite, so she told Reynard to let him know if anything bothered him. The heroine thought that the clothes were really human wings. After all, beautiful clothes can beautify anyone. Reynard, dressed in clean clothes, entered the living room. He himself was surprised by his new unusual image. The lady admired him and was satisfied with her work. He became like a real aristocrat. The young mage shifted from foot to foot in excitement. Urina said that it suits him very well and asked if he did all the work. Then she came closer to him and started sniffing almost imperceptibly. Reynard noticed this and asked if he smelled good now. Urina made a sly face. She noted in her mind that he smelled good now, but she didn't say it out loud. Instead, the girl said that he now smelled like a normal person, and the young man asked her about the soap he used to wash himself. He cautiously inquired whether she also used this kind of soap. The lady looked confused. She asked to clarify which soap we are talking about. The young guest himself was not happy that he started this conversation, but he did answer that the soap was round and yellow. Urina said with an indifferent face that she probably uses it too. Not understanding why he was so confused by this soap, she suggested that it might have too sweet a scent, so she offered to replace it. Then he asked the young landlady if she was the only one who usually used it. Urina nodded affirmatively. She didn't understand why he was making this pointless question about what she used to wash herself with. She was already tired of this conversation, so she started calling the worker to replace the damn soap. Ray rushed to beg her not to. The girl calmed down and waited for an explanation from the young man who seemed strange to her. Reynard finally managed to explain that he liked the smell and wanted to use it too. Urina looked angry but agreed with him. The young man stood meekly opposite and couldn't even move from the shock. After so many events and a long conversation, it was finally time to have dinner. Urina noticed that the guest did not even know how to hold the cutlery correctly. Therefore, she came up with the idea that maybe we should hire a tutor for him. Carefully examining his eating habits at the table, the girl determined that there is still a lot of work ahead with him. After a delicious feast, Reynard happily plopped down on a soft sofa and Urena, who came into the room at that very moment, forbade him to even think about it, and said that by doing so he would violate the contract. Ray quickly got up from the sofa and asked what exactly was the contract in question. Urena shouted in displeasure that she had already told him. She went on to specify the details of the same contract. The conversation between young people began to take place in raised tones. Ray screamed what she could do to him if he didn't want to save her. The girl said that she would not force him to do it. At the same time, she added that she didn't want to tell him about it, but she still has to. Does she not understand what is the benefit of her doing it if she gets nothing in return? The young man screamed in despair but did not argue. Urena mentally called the boy a fool. After all, judging by his reaction to her words, he understood and accepted everything. The lady said that they have no right to The girl noticed about herself that if he did not show his character, he would still remain a child. At this time, Reynard still dared to ask about his knack for magic. He said he knew magic was a very serious business. He tried to understand what could connect him with such a complex science. Reynard was tormented by the question, how can he become a great magician if he was born in an ordinary family and his parents did not have any The thought occurred to him that maybe he was not his own son, but he did not say it out loud. Urena hastened to calm him down. She said that a person is born with a talent for magic. Parents have nothing to do with it. Seeing the confused little one sitting in front of her, she tried to explain. She gave an example when it happens that the parents are magicians and an ordinary child is born to them, and Reynard was very surprised that this could even happen. The guest said that he himself still does not understand whether he has a knack for magic or not. He asked where. Urena said that she is a completely ordinary person. The guy was confused and stopped understanding anything at all. To put an end to these suspicions and silly talk, Pani confidently said that she tried to clarify what she meant. The girl said that her unusual red eyes gave her such confidence in his future. Reynard was not entirely satisfied with this explanation. Worried as always, he said that everyone around him said that he was cursed by some goddess. That's how everyone and he himself explained his reddened eyes, not like everyone else's. Urena sat down closer and, trying to calm the poor man, said that such a feature is a blessing, not a curse at all. But Reynard had doubts about everything the girl said. He was worried about what would happen to him next. At the moment of their frank conversation, footsteps were heard in the corridor. Ray was very worried that he might be sent to the asylum again, and he asked Urena about it. Finally, the steps became closer and closer, and a man entered the living room. He happily greeted the lady. The boy was frightened and turned into a cat again, and Urena did not understand who was standing in front of her. The man who had just walked in looked very handsome and flamboyant. He seemed to entice the audience with his gaze. Urena felt very embarrassed but still managed to ask if he was Dave. Reynard was also very excited when he saw the stranger. The lady tried to calm him down and asked him not to be so nervous. Urena's father entered the living room with her husband and introduced Dave to them. Dave looked cocky and looked at Ray with a smile on his face. Ray, on the other hand, looked at the guest warily and incredulously. Dave kissed Lady's hand as a sign of attention and said that they had not seen each other for a long. At the same time, Urena looked embarrassed and confirmed that their last meeting had indeed been a long time ago. In order to reduce the tension a little, she immediately got down to business. Lady pointed at Ray and told him that she would like to test his special ability. Urena introduced the little one with red eyes, saying that his name is Reynard. The man, who was almost 2 heads taller than the boy, studied him carefully. He already had some assumptions about the boy. Instead, he announced that he would immediately begin testing Reynard for magical abilities. The first thing Dave did was take the boy's hand and start checking his pulse. Suddenly, some strange processes began to take place, which Ray unfortunately had no control over. Dave looked like a true professional. He even closed his eyes for a closer inspection. Urena stood nearby and also took part in the magical processes around her. Finally, she asked Dave what could he say. Quite unexpectedly for everyone, the man drew the little one to him and asked the lady to give Reynard to him. Urena was not at all surprised by such a reaction of her husband, who was checking on her little one. But Dave did not give up and asked the girl to think again about his proposal. She refused again. The real battle for the gifted. The girl firmly said that she intended to send the gifted boy to study at Krone Academy. Dave continued to persuade. He boasted that he could teach the boy magical science much better. The man also added that Urena believed him but did not agree and again categorically rejected him. Calm Dave lost his balance. He did not understand why he was not trusted. The heroine was upset that she had not foreseen such a development in advance. But she cannot fail. After all, according to the plot of the novel, Urena understood that if Ray studied with Dave, he would also gain good knowledge. But this was against her previously thought-out plan. The girl was sure that studying at the academy would give the boy the opportunity to develop abilities that would later shake up the entire empire. She was also worried that if he didn't join the academy, he wouldn't be able to protect her from Marquis de Fron in the future. Frustrated, Dave said that he had run out of persuasion, so he agreed with Pawnee's decision, but he asked to work out with the boy before he left. Urena felt like the winner and owner of the boy. She said she didn't mind them studying together, and she meant to ask him for it as well. The cunning girl knew that there was another equally important reason why she wanted to send him to the academy, and it was her rival, the beautiful Lydia de Fron. The heroine had to do everything possible to prevent Reynard and Lydia from meeting. After all, she remembered that according to the plot of the book, the events developed in this way. Finally, Father appeared again. He asked Dave if the kid had the necessary talent to study at Crone Academy. He replied that it would not be a problem for him to enter there. Moreover, the dean of the academy himself must come and persuade him to become their student. But he also added that he found it strange that he couldn't catch a wave of mana from him. According to him, Dave continued to explain to his father, the fact is that even an experienced mage will find it difficult to keep all the mana in. After analyzing everything, the man incredulously asked the owners where they found Reynard. Urena herself was surprised by such a discovery. She revealed that she had taken him from Baron Genon's asylum. Dave was getting nervous. He asked about Baron Genon if he is not. The guest still worried about the question, how did she know that the boy had such a talent? What he asked about. Urena understood his suspicions. After all, now her heroine was only 11 years old. Of course, anyone will have questions how such a young... But she cannot reveal the truth, which is that in a past life, Reynard was an outstanding magician and later killed her himself. This, making an angelic face, Urena informs Dave that she will tell him everything. She started with the fact that lately she has been visiting all kinds of shelters a lot, and in one village she was told an interesting legend. According to her, the legend said that a child with red eyes received the blessing of the goddess. She asked if it was true that Master Mage William also had red eyes. Urena talked about it so confidently that Dave could not contradict her, and believed about the red eyes of the magician William. Although it was not true. Playing the role of a naive girl, the heroine admitted that she herself did not immediately believe in this legend, and even laughed at it. But after some time she met Reynard. Urena asked Dave, does he also think all this is unreal? Little Ray wondered what was. Of those present, only Urena knew the real truth. She was aware that even in the book no one knew what the red eyes meant. Only Carry-On him. It seems Urena managed to convince him. The man looked pleased. Dave knelt down in front of the girl and with a sly look told him that he thought she had grown up so much, but she hadn't. The girl was pleasantly surprised, but asked if he was really going to write such a letter about Ray. Dave replied that he was just doing his job, and also expressed his sadness that Reynard could not become his apprentice. He turned to the young man and told him that he had actually been blessed by the goddess. He wished him luck at the academy. Urena was very pleased that she managed everything. She shouted happily to her father. Of course, the father was not happy with such a decision, but he replied that he did not object, and that she could do as she wanted. The daughter kindly thanked her father for his affection. Urena analyzed the outcome of the events and noted that everything is going according to plan so far. One dark night, a man in a cloak approached the prince and asked His Highness if he was really called. The young dark-haired youth who was the prince nodded affirmatively. He went on to say that he learned that some people didn't like him, but he intriguingly added, do they need to prepare for the exit? At the same time, secret negotiations between two men were held in one of the rooms. The visitor, hiding his face, looked carefully at Urena's personal case and promised the owner that they would do everything as he asked. The heroine and Reynard were finally alone, and the girl closed the door to the living room. She thought to herself that half the work was done. All that remained was to persuade the Marquise. The girl turned to the boy and asked if he finally understood that she was not going to send him back to the shelter. Ray didn't understand the question. When it finally reached him, he thanked the lady for her kindness, but he did it very reluctantly. Yurin was amused by the expression on the little man's face. She mentally laughed and noted that it was not easy for her to. She then said that now they needed to go to the room. But she was still worried about Ray's face, so she asked what happened. Reynard quoted Urina as saying that she was no longer a child. That's how she answered Dave. At the same time, the lady blushed and was embarrassed by how Reynard had definitely picked up on her intonation. It was a sunny, warm morning in the manor. Urina got dressed to visit the city. Ray asked her if she was sure she was going. She confirmed it. She hastened to calm the agitated boy and said that she would be back soon and that he should wait for her here. Two maids who were also standing nearby offered the lady to go down instead of her, but she refused. Urina said that she intends to buy clothes for Ray and also wants to choose a gift for her mother herself. Ray was standing next to him with a pail. She turned to leave and shouted to the little one that she would be back very soon. While the heroine was riding in the carriage to the city, many thoughts about the Marquise of Karcha were swirling in her head. The last time she saw her was about 6 months ago, but he remembers her as a gentle and kind woman. Urina compared her to an iris flower because the Marquise was so elegant and beautiful. The heroine also mentions that the Marquise was always polite and attentive, not only to her family, but also to the maids, which is not characteristic of the aristocracy. But if she saw disrespect from the children continued to mention urine, she scolded them harshly for it. Therefore, the girl was very worried about whether she would accept Reynard, and what would happen if she did not allow him to stay. After all, it can harm her plans. Finally, the carriage arrived at the town square, where it was very crowded and noisy, because the fair was taking place. The assistant girl had never seen anything like this, and told the lady with admiration that there were so many people here. Urina mentally noted that it was too easy to surprise the assistant and wished her to. The nanny lost her head from such diversity around her and asked the lady to come in everywhere. The lady in turn warned Betty. Betty began to persuade Urina. She said that they had not rested for so long because Pana had a lot of work to do. The girl agreed with the nanny, and her eyes lit up. She was going to find a suitable gift for her mother, so they went to a tent with different colored fabrics. Betty saw that the girl looked a little confused among so many people, so she offered to go to the store, but she answered that everything is fine with her. Urina said that she was interested in looking at people. There was such a commotion around. She also asked the nanny not to follow her and to leave her alone. She assured that she is comfortable here. Urina at this very time was busy thinking about what would be the best gift for the Marquis, and how to start this conversation in general. Was she really worried about whether she would accept Ray? Tired of these experiences, she forced herself to stop thinking. Betty pointed to the product on the shelf and asked if she liked it. Then she showed a yellow handkerchief. Urina approved the choice. Nanny said she was sure the Marquise would like it. The girl tried to smile, because she promised to have a good time here. Urina reported that she carefully looked at the bottom of the product. On the handkerchief next to the pattern was a picture of a cute cat, and she showed it to Betty. Laughing, the mistress asked if the nanny didn't think the cat looked so much like Reynard. The assistant did not immediately understand, and asked again. Urina once again showed the drawing, and she already agreed with it. Betty was very glad that Pani finally started laughing, and her mood improved. She expressed hope that this will happen more often now. The nanny frankly admitted to the girl that they were all very worried lately because she was growing up fast. She also reminded that Urina used to cry often, and she calmed her down. The assistant decided to show her devotion to the girl. She started to say that if Urina needed any help, but then something unexpected happened. A man with a covered face ran up to them. He was approaching Urina, but Betty quickly found her way and covered her with herself. Footsteps were heard on the square. Someone was heading straight for them. It was a dark-haired young man, a prince. He turned to the attacker and asked how he dared to aim at him. The masked man replied that he did not understand what was being asked of him because they did not even know each other. Urina could not move from fright. The enraged prince said that he was not interested in his silly excuses. Next, they noticed how the stranger took out a dagger. The prince cursed loud. The lady also got angry and stepped forward to hurt the attacker. Her assistant started screaming in terror to warn and save Urina. The prince quickly flew up to the young girl and knocked the dagger out of the attacker's hands. In the middle of the square, there was a real commotion and a fight. The masked and hooded stranger growled at the prince to keep him out of his business. It was clear that everything did not go according to plan for him. His Highness looked contemptuously and suspiciously at the insolent assailant. At that moment, Urina began to suspect something was wrong. The situation seemed strange to her, and she wondered who could make. Then the prince took possession of a dagger and rushed at the enemy, a stranger. He punched the masked man and he fell to the ground. The weak girl could not stand such nervous tension, pushed the young man away and also fell to the ground. The prince, with the proud look of a conqueror, turned to the frightened young lady. Betty ran up to Urina and started calling for help. The girl replied that she was fine. His Highness also asked the young person if she was hurt. Then the events are transferred from the crowded square to a safe, closed street. The winner of the battle. The nanny and the young lady were standing around the corner. The man apologized to the girls if he might have scared them. Urina politely objected and thanked. She said that thanks to him they are all right. The prince replied that he was glad that everything had ended so well. The frightened assistant turned to the lady and asked if it is possible that today is enough adventure and we need to go home. The girl replied that everything is fine. The nanny offered to run quickly and get everything herself. Meanwhile, the prince was asked to stay and guard the lady. The dark-haired youth replied that it would not be a problem for him at all. But when the two of them were left alone, he added that the girl's assistant was quite active. Urina felt guilty and expressed the assumption that she was causing a lot of problems for the young man. His Highness made it clear that everything was fine and asked why she had tried to stop him in the recent dawn. In response, Urina once again thanked the savior, but admitted that she was worried about them. She added that the soldiers would very obviously have arrived there soon because the people around them would have started shouting. Urina tried to explain. The fact is that it was quite a crowded place and there could have been a real panic. This, in her opinion, could lead to the fact that many people would suffer. The prince said he liked her thoughts. The girl said that maybe she brought it a little rudely to him, but asked to see her as just a child. The prince tactfully replied that it was actually a good point. Urina at that moment did not leave the thought that they might be acquaintances, and she was uncomfortable about it. Having nothing at hand, she tore a piece of cloth from her dress and bandaged the injured arm of her rescuer. The lady excitedly said that now the blood is showing even through the bandage. But at the same time, the wound is not too deep, and that is good. But she also warned the young man. The prince looked embarrassed and asked if she was sorry for the cloth. Urina said, "How can you value something more than a person's life?" The young man noted that she is quite an interesting person. Urina realized that she was beginning to feel ashamed of such a conversation, so she asked her husband if he didn't need to go because he had some business. The young man asked in surprise, did she really use the expression, "young sir"? The girl did not understand. He mockingly repeated this expression again, and Pani nervously asked why he was so surprised by this. Then the man said that now it became clear to him why she behaved so freely with him. He suggested that she did not understand anything at all. Urina apologized if she behaved tactlessly, but she really did not understand what was happening and who he was. The dark-haired young man added that he was sorry that it turned out that way, because she stood up for him. Urina raised her childish eyes at him and asked what he meant, but suddenly she heard a scream. That masked assailant with a sword in his hands was standing behind her and was swinging at her. The frightened lady was stunned by horror and surprise, because she saw a sharp blade above her. The prince was not lost this time and showed all his courage. He pushed the robber away from the girl, snatched the sword. Later, he said that he was sure that he was the target of the attacker. But now he understood that both then and now the stranger wanted to harm this young person. Seeing that Urina was staring at the attacker who was lying on the ground and very nervous, the young man told her not to worry, because he is alive. The prince bent over the victim and hesitated whether to take the sword from him or not. He offered Urina to leave him here because soon the soldiers would come for him. The man also warned that they had better go to another safe place and asked her if she knew the address of the store. Then they saw that the assistant was already returning, and both noticed that it was just in time. His Highness said they would say goodbye here. The girl was embarrassed and did not immediately manage to answer something. Finally, she was able to thank him for staying with her while the nanny went to the store. The young man said that this was a usual thing for him, and began to unroll the bandage. Urina noticed this, and reassured him that he could keep the cloth for himself. She also explained that it was primarily needed to provide first aid, but now he must show the wound to the doctor. The prince kindly told her that she was an extremely good girl. Finally, he added that she is also quite sincere, not at all like all aristocrats. He also expressed hope that fate will bring them together. Then he turned around, wished her all the best, and said goodbye. Urina was silent. She could not find the right words because she was confused. The prince headed across the city bridge and saw his knight's guard walking towards him. One of them turned to him and asked if he was all right. The young man asked in response, were they worried about him? The senior knight angrily asked why the escort was not with his highness all this time. He noticed that the prince was injured and offered to call a doctor urgently. The guard started calling for help. The prince replied that there was no need to worry because he was given first aid, and the wound was not deep. The prince's thoughts at this time were occupied by the young beauty he had recently rescued. He regretted not even asking her name. He remembered her face and reassured himself that they would definitely meet again. Urina entered the living room. She saw Ray and called out to him the day before she had asked him to leave her alone when they were at the estate, and now she noticed that he had listened to her. But her thoughts did not leave her, and she continued to worry whether the Marquis of Cartia would refuse to allow Reynard to stay. The young man was a little ashamed of this attitude towards himself and asked Pana if it was necessary for everyone to greet him so solemnly. Urina wondered in her mind, was Ray really a talented kid or a coward? She explained to him that if it so happened that his father had officially decided to shelter him, then all the proper procedures had to be followed. She added that even if he was a simple boy now, he had become one of them, almost a member of the family. Another of her arguments was that he would now study magic, but Reynard asked, what is the purpose of this? Urina did not hesitate to explain again. The point was that when a mage completes his studies and returns from the academy, he is sure to be knighted. She also reminded him that he even got a good description from Dave, so no one could have any doubts about him and his status. Reynard tried to understand the lady's words and thought. She gently touched Ray's hand. Urina assured him that all these people are just hired workers whom Mother hired. They do not intend to offend him, and if someone dares, he will be immediately fired. After that, the young landlady asked the boy to make his face more friendly. She wanted him to smile when talking to her mother. Ray was annoyed by this and asked why he always had to walk around with a smile. He decided that Marquise Cartia was an evil woman and asked Urina about it, but the girl said that on the contrary, she is very kind and friendly. At the same time, Pani mentioned that sometimes she can be really scary. The maid opened the door and told them that they could come in. The Marquise was waiting for them. The mother called her daughter by name. Urina joyfully rushed to her and began to hug her. Ray obediently stood behind. Marquise Cartia began to ask her daughter about the journey, whether she was tired, and expressed concern that she had not rested at all, but immediately came to her. Urina said that she missed her very much. The woman said that the young lady still needed to rest in her room, and she herself would visit her. She also reported that she herself wanted to meet her, but there was a lot of dust which is dangerous for her daughter's weak health. The girl agreed with her and mentally noted that Urina was really frail. The fact is that half a year ago, Urina became very ill when she was visiting her mother. She had a high temperature. The Marquise did not leave her daughter for several days and looked after her, but even after Urina regained consciousness, she still remained heavy. She even thought for a moment that her beloved daughter had died. When the hug was over, the mother informed her that the father had warned her about the boy they had taken under their patronage. She asked if he was with her. Urina nodded affirmatively and asked Ray to say hello. The young man greeted uncertainly. Unipani was worried that he would behave rudely, but now she was convinced that he was much nicer than Dave. Marquise Cartia was satisfied after the acquaintance. The young man was asked if he liked this estate. He looked at Urina in confusion. The woman saw that the guy was a little embarrassed, so she decided to explain everything she meant. Was everything okay in his room? Was he comfortable there? After all, according to her, they haven't had such small guests for a long time. That's why she's worried. Ray confirmed that he finally understood what he was talking about. He was frightened by such frank questions, so he, in order to get rid of him as soon as possible, answered that he liked everything very much. Urina mentally noted that there was a pleasant, friendly atmosphere. She also noticed that Reynard was actually quite pliable. Well, this is not surprising because he is only 12 years old. The maids entered the room to help the children get settled. The Marquise suggested that the young man go to rest and informed him that tomorrow he would be given a nice outfit. Ray agreed. When mother and daughter were left alone, Urina asked the Marquise if everything was all right. The mother did not understand and asked again. The girl excitedly clarified what she meant by Ray, but she was worried about one question. She knew that her father had allowed the boy to be kept because he had a special gift. But why the Marquise agreed so easily she could not yet understand. Mother asked if there were any problems with Reynard. Urena was so nervous about this question that she crumpled her dress. She looked unsure and tried to say that there was no problem. Marquise Cartier saw her daughter's strange condition, hugged her, and asked why she was behaving like that. Does she think that her mother will be angry with her? The girl admitted to herself that such care of her mother moved her very much. The woman gently turned to her daughter and admitted that she, as a mother, only wanted her to be happy and not sick, and she didn't need anything else. Urena recognized a sense of guilt in herself, feeling guilty that she is not her own daughter, but she is cared for as the closest. The girl joyfully called her mother. At the same time, Unapani understood that along with the care of the Marquise and her sense of guilt, the woman was still very similar to her own mother. She missed her because it was clear that they would never see each other again. The next day, Reynard had a fitting. Urena, who was also present, asked how old he was. The boy again seemed not to have heard or understood the question. The girl, with a sly face, thought to herself that she actually knew his age, but decided to ask again so as not to anger the little one. In fact, she doubted. Was he 11 or 12? She began to think and count in her mind. Last winter, Carrion and Lydia were 2 years apart in age. The lady continued to think logically. The fact is that Lydia is now 10, and she is a year younger than Urena. It's summer, but according to Urena's calculations, the birthday hasn't happened yet, so the little one is now 11 or 12 years old. The young man snickered. He answered that he was 12 and asked if Urena was 11. She nodded affirmatively. Joyful Ray concluded that she was a year younger than him, so she was still a child. Urena noted about herself that although he is older, he is physically no different from her. She winked slyly at the boy and said that there was only a year difference between them. Reynard did not give up and continued to argue that it was a whole year and he would grow up much faster 2 years faster. Urena playfully objected that if the difference between them is 1 year, then why does he think that I will grow up 2 years faster? The young man defiantly replied that he would soon be 13. The girl rolled her eyes in surprise and asked again. Reynard himself did not really believe his words, but confidently confirmed that he was 13 years old. The girl continued to doubt his words. She couldn't understand where such an age came from. She began to count everything again in her mind. After all, it turned out that Carrion is older than Lydia by as many as 3 years. Such strange mathematics led the heroine to think that her memory failed her this time. Ray could see the girl's confusion, so he asked what was wrong with her. She replied that everything is fine, but she still noted in her mind that before she couldn't even remember the title of the novel, so it's no wonder she forgot her age. Urena, while the young man was being dressed, continued to analyze and recall the plot of the novel. It turned out that she did not remember Carrion well. He had blonde hair and red eyes and a unique name. She also remembered that the boy grew up with a single mother who owned a bar. After some time, he ran away to an orphanage. Marquis de Franc took him to his house in the winter. He also studied at the Krone Academy. According to the book, when Lydia came of age, he returned. Urena also remembered that Lydia had left Carrion with his good nature and chosen a crown prince who was a true despot. But she remembered little about him. But now, at the present moment, it seemed strange to Urena. How could such a cheeky boy be so friendly and kind? She looked at Carrion at the fitting room and noted that he needed to eat better. She continued to tease the young man. She said that according to him, he seems to be 2 years older than her, but they are the same height. She also added that the clothes he is trying on now were worn by her brother Lix when he was 10 years old. Carrion couldn't stand it and started screaming that soon he would be very tall and her neck would hurt when she addressed him. The assistants began to calm him down. Urena asked in disbelief why he was so sure of this. The boy replied that his father was tall and he looked like him. The girl liked to make him nervous, so she asked if it was his mother who told him about it. The poor young man looked very upset. He replied that his father, who was actually tall, told him so. Unapani looked confused. The young man's story did not fit well in her head. Suddenly, a servant entered the room and addressed the lady. Urena noticed that the household assistants did not like Reynard very much, although they had promised the Marquis he talks to her quite freely. The fact that Carrion had the opportunity to behave like this in the estate is all thanks to the Marquis, or rather thanks to his promises. Urena reflected that she still managed to convince the Marquis that Reynard would not be able to associate with the workers, but in response the Marquis put forward his conditions. The father wanted their young guest to learn all the rules of etiquette. The boy was bored by such training. Urena remembered the second condition. It consisted in the fact that Ray had to behave politely in public, not forgetting aristocratic manners. Also, he had to respect not only the Marquis and the Marquise, but also their older sons who were currently studying at the academy. The heroine thought that she herself wanted to ask him for this. However, Robert still ignores him as a guest. She saw that the butler flatly refused to contact Ray. She turned to him and wanted to understand why he behaved so coldly towards the little one. Robert interrupted Urena and told her that Mr. Dave was calling her. She replied that she understood and asked if they had finished taking measurements for the clothes. The worker replied that she was done with that, but now it remained to choose the design and material of the clothes. Reynard nervously asked if this wasn't the end yet. Urena explained to him that clothes are quite difficult to sew. The tired young man replied disgruntled that he had been standing for a long time at the fitting room and did not understand why he needed more. Urena calmly repeated that now it is necessary to choose the design and colors of the clothes. Urena voiced her guess that Ray might be tired already. She added that for a complete set you still need to pick up shoes and other accessories. Ray replied that he didn't care and didn't know anything. The girl also lost her temper because of the guy's behavior. She shouted for him to sit up straight. She also added that they accepted him officially, so he must follow all the rules of the Cartier family and not spoil their reputation. Reynard was not joking. He screamed that he didn't want to learn which fork to eat with because Urena's life was so boring. The lady replied that he started arguing too early and he still had so much to learn. The boy continued to whimper. He did not understand why everyone said that the colors were different for him. Everything was the same. Urena confirmed that they are really different. She advised him to choose the design further, and she needed to meet her father. Frightened, Reynard asked Urena to visit her father later and not to leave him. The girl noticed that he was still afraid and worried. The heroine said that she still had to go because her father and Dave were waiting for her. She also reminded that Robert is nearby and will help him in everything. Reynard took this into account, but was almost unsettled. Finally, she asked Robert to be careful with Ray. He nodded affirmatively. Urena shouted that she would be back soon. The young man agreed in disbelief. The girl visited her father in his office. Dave said that there are only 2 ways to get into the academy. The first is to pass the exam, and the second, according to the husband, is to enter based on a letter of recommendation. He continued that if he chooses the second option, he will have to go through an interview where his capabilities will be checked. Dave added that it is better to enter after the exams. It became more difficult to use letters of recommendation because there were more cases when people without the necessary magical characteristics wanted to get into the academy. The father tried to deny that the exam should be taken not only on the subject of magic, but also on general subjects. Therefore, he wondered if he would be able to enter in the spring. Urena also understood that the entrance exams to the Krone Academy were held in the spring, so there was not much time left. She reflected that he should under any circumstances enter there next spring. The girl knew that she had been studying at the academy for 7 years. There are those who finish even later, but there are no cases to finish earlier. She also remembered from the plot of the book that Urena and Lydia would meet as candidates for the Crown Princess, and it will happen when the heroine comes of age. Under all circumstances, it is clear that they have no chance not to meet. Therefore, Reynard absolutely needs to enter the academy, and after 8 years to protect Urena. Having analyzed all the factors, Urena turned to her father so that he would not worry. She added that Ray is a talented enough guy and has every chance of getting in with a letter of recommendation. The heroine thought to herself that as far as she understands, only magical abilities will be taken into account at the interview, although correctly prepared documents also decide a lot. Father reasoned that if Dave wanted him as his student, then he was really talented. But at the same time, he hesitated that one letter of recommendation would be enough. Dave cleared his throat and announced that he had something to say. He said with a sly smile that he had a lot of influence among the magicians, So if Ray reveals that he studied with him, it will reflect well on his reputation. He also added that if he says that he is supported by the Cardia family, he will be talked about everywhere. Urena listening carefully to, Dave noticed that now he was more than similar to Reynard. The heroine consoled herself with the fact that Ray has every opportunity to enter the Crone Academy after all her brothers also entered in the same way. But unfortunately, she did not remember very well how Carrion went to get the book. The heroine mentally began to equate book events with reality. Carrion managed to get in with a letter of recommendation from the Marquis de Fron. Dave also needs to compose a letter no worse than the one from the Marquis. Urena dismissed her worries because she recognized that Dave is indeed a professional magician, behind whom Mr. Cardia himself stands. Now, of course, the situation was different, but Ray had every chance to enter the academy. Dave happily told them not to worry about Reynard's training. He promised to find more authoritative people who would also sign the letter. Urena replied that she was not comfortable asking him for such a thing. The man replied that if this is the lady's wish, he will gladly fulfill it. But he also intends to do it for the gifted Ray. The girl admitted that she secretly thought that Dave would deliberately delay the introduction with help in order to teach Ray himself. The man also admitted in response that he had such thoughts. But at the same time, he understands that it is impossible to waste time, because it will be too late to start at the age of 12. Young mistress slyly informed her that according to Reynard himself, he would soon be 13. Dave was surprised and concluded that it was all the more necessary to prepare him for the entrance sooner. Urena was glad that everything was going so well thanks to Dave. In fact, the Marquis stopped doubting the little one. The heroine thought that everything was going well now when she heard something fall to the floor and break. She did not immediately understand what happened and even cursed. Urena and the maids were standing under the closed door of the room behind which those strange sounds were heard. She turned to Beth's assistant and demanded an explanation of what was happening here. Urena specified that she wanted detailed explanations. Betty began her story. She said that when the lady left, Reynard was afraid of her and Mrs. Lauren, but everything was going well. Mrs. Lauren showed the boys fabric samples and colors. There seemed to be no problems, but there was one but. Betty continued excitedly. The thing was, when Mrs. Lauren was picking out the headpiece, something happened. Then the frightened girl fell silent. Urena demanded the continuation of the story and did not understand why Betty stopped telling. The maid chose her words for a long time. Finally, she said that Mrs. Lauren had said something to Reynard. Urena was surprised Betty said the older woman pointed out his red eyes to the boy and advised him to cover them if he went outside the estate. The heroine began to scream. She got really angry and said that she had warned Robert and the others that she would punish anyone who dared to talk about his red eyes. At the same time, Urena understood in her heart that this was not a surprise for her. After all, she perceives his eyes as hope, but others do not think so at all. Everyone sees in his eyes only a sense of fear of something unknown. In the Empire, red was never considered a bad sign, but all the same it was the red eyes that were identified with the curse. Urena remembered that she had deliberately warned Robert about such a peculiarity of Ray in advance. That is why it was not too inflated in the estate. The lady then asked if Robert had made no remark to Mrs. Lauren. Betty replied that there was no remark, but the fact that the courtier had warned everyone was indisputable. At the same time, Betty tensed up and began to tell the whole truth about the situation that had happened. It turns out that Mrs. Lorraine told Reynard that he should be grateful to the Cardia family for harboring a bad boy like him. She added that the young lady must have a big heart if she went to such a thing. The woman said that she would never have made clothes for such a sinister little one if she had not been asked to do so by the respected Carthia family. The final straw was when Mrs. Lorraine said that even being around him was unpleasant and dangerous. Reynard immediately remembered his life in the asylum, namely how the other children treated him, how they disliked him and avoided him. The boy's eyes filled with horror, but he could not control himself and his anger. Betty said they immediately intervened, but Mrs. Lorraine's hand was injured, so Robert immediately took her to the doctor. The girl added that Lorraine behaved like a real fox and held her head proudly. She reassured herself that she was doing all this for the sake of the Cardia family. Urena did not like this story. She looked sternly at the maid and asked if they all just left the room while Reynard was rioting at that time. The girl nodded affirmatively. The lady was very upset because of the situation that happened. After she took the boy from the shelter, she wanted to show him a better carefree life. Urena was disgusted by Mrs. Lorraine. She thought she was strong and was fighting against the weak, but in reality it was the opposite. It pained her to think how Reynard must have felt when he heard such malicious remarks directed at him. The young landlady gave orders that as soon as Mrs. Lorraine was examined by the doctor, she should be brought here immediately. Betty pointed out that it could be dangerous. Urena started knocking on the door of the room where Reynard was and warned that she wanted to enter. The girl started to enter but heard a shout that it was forbidden to approach. A vase flew straight at Urena but fell nearby and broke. Next, she saw poor Reynard writhing on the sofa. She turned to him. He sat motionless and did not even look up at the girl. He felt so bad at that moment. Urena was still very upset. She wondered what to do next with Ray and Mrs. Lorraine. She decided that she would definitely make this woman pay for what she had done, although in any other situation, she would have just yelled at her. She was ready to take on Ray's anger. The girl also understood the boy's offense. He was angry that she had left him alone and had humiliated him so. She thought she should apologize to him and reassure him, so she called him and said that she was very sorry that she came too late. Urena didn't understand why Ray was shaking like that all the time. She promised him that she would punish Mrs. Lorraine for treating him like that. She continued talking to the young man when she saw that he finally raised his eyes to her. The girl saw his tears and excitedly asked what was wrong with his look. He screamed in fright so that she wouldn't look. Reynard shouted at Urena that she had lied to him. He lamented that his red eyes were not the blessing of the goddess. The guy accused the girl of allegedly telling him about his superpowers. Urena felt alarmed. She didn't know what to do with him because he's not even 13 yet. Unapani mentally lamented the fact that he did not receive love from his parents during his life, and even complete strangers mock him because of his red eyes. The young magician painfully reported that she was the only one who believed in his special abilities. Urena's ears echoed the desperate words of Ray that she was the only one who believed in him. The girl mentally began to justify herself. She reminded herself that she was alone in an unfamiliar place and was trying to escape. She also admitted to herself that she used Reynard but didn't think about his feelings at the time. She was so ashamed that she admitted that she was almost no different from Mrs. Lorraine. Urena regretted that she could not tell Ray the whole truth, which was that he was definitely blessed by the goddess and red eyes were her symbol. She knew for sure that he would become the kindest and most wonderful person in the world. The girl took the young man's hand and said that it was all her fault. She kept apologizing, but Ray couldn't say a word. Finally, he looked at the vase he had broken and said that everything here was so unfamiliar to him and everyone was looking at him as if he were a stranger. Urena agreed with him and once again apologized. The landlady promised that she would personally punish Mrs. Lorraine and make sure that next time no one would allow such a thing. She advised the young man that if someone dares to look at him with impudence, accept it with pride. After all, according to her, if they allow themselves to behave like this with him, then they do not respect the young lady either. She also kindly added that his eyes were extremely beautiful. Urena compared them to rubies and explained that these are precious red stones. That's why his eyes look so much like him. The girl noticed that she liked how he looked at her without any hesitation.